Let's talk about clutches. Welcome back and thanks for being here. My name is Scott, and if you've been watching the channel, then you know that I recently surpassed the 200,000 mile mark. Right around the same time, it came time to replace a clutch. I am going to shoot two clutch videos right now. And the first clutch I'm going to talk about is the clutch that was removed. That would be the RSR clutch by HS Tuning. Now, I didn't stay with RSR, and I'll explain that in a minute, but I thought what I would do is do a long-term review of this clutch. And if you've seen my initial review of the clutch, then you know that I've been very happy with it. It was advertised to hold 480 pound-feet of torque when I bought it, and later that spec was revised to say, quote-unquote, Mark 5, Mark 6, 480, and then MQB, 380 pound-feet. So having this APR Stage 2 at the time, I was right at that limit, but the setup was still recommended by HS Tuning. I downgraded my APR tune to a 91 AKI file due to a coast-to-coast trip. Out west, 93 AKI is not available, so I went to the lower octane tune, and then that reduced my engine torque to 371 pound-feet, and that was with their old file. I think they advertised something differently now, but that was still within the spec for the RSR clutch. Now, I had reported that the clutch was indeed stiffer than stock, but that was really easy to adapt to the new feel. The clutch engagement was a little closer to the floor, perhaps by about an inch, and that resulted in the first time I went the driveway with the car, I stalled very quickly because I wasn't used to it, but that was not hard to manage at all after realizing that I needed to adjust the way I drove. The break-in period for new clutches is 500 to 1,000 miles, preferably with mostly city driving, so then you're working that clutch. And I was completely accustomed to the new clutch feel by the end of that period. I drove the RSR clutch with APR Stage 2 for nearly 100,000 miles without a single problem. I upgraded to an APR IS38 setup at 128,000 miles. For those of you who don't know, the IS38 is the Golf R's turbo. I stayed with the 91 AKI files, and that's why I could have a nationwide travel. I wouldn't have to change my tune every time I was going to go west of Texas. That kept my torque at a very manageable 376 pound-feet. It was awfully close to the 380 pound-foot limit for HS Tuning's RSR clutch still, though everything was fine for a while. Later, and I can't say when, I managed to slip the clutch on occasion. It always happened during sprints, but it didn't happen every time. I couldn't duplicate the scenarios in which the clutch slipped, but I also didn't want to. I just continued to drive the car normally, which meant, a lot of grandpa driving with occasional sprints, regular highway trips, and of course, in my case, pulling a trailer from time to time. My most recent trip, which was a 1,500-mile round trip to Nashville, Chattanooga, and Knoxville, Tennessee, it introduced a slip that I couldn't ignore. My car was loaded for supporting a bicycle tour, and I had the extra wind resistance of a rooftop cargo box. So I was climbing a mountain pass in Western Virginia, and I felt what I perceived as a hesitation with the engine. It almost felt like something was missing. And so I watched the RPMs, I watched everything very closely because I had just had the intake cleaned and I was pretty sensitive to any odd behavior. The engine only missed a few times. So once I got to someplace safe, I connected my scan tool and I searched to see if there were any stored diagnostic trouble codes, and there was nothing. A few miles later, it dawned on me that what I had really experienced was slight slipping of the clutch. You see, all of my experience with clutch slip on this car and on previous cars, all of that had happened while I was doing a brisk acceleration, which means that the engine RPMs would pick up a bit, and that's because I'm trying to accelerate, right? So of course the tach is going to move up because I'm trying to sprint. But this was the first time that I had a clutch slip while driving at a steady speed, albeit with a heavy load. So the engine didn't outrace the clutch because I wasn't trying to accelerate. So it was a little confusing at first, but I understood what I had experienced pretty quickly after I thought about it. I didn't have any additional incidents during the rest of the trip, and I probably could have put off replacing the clutch since I was returning to the coast where the roads were mostly flat, but I decided that it was time for a replacement. Once I looked at my logs and did a little bit of math, I was able to see that the clutch lasted a total of 165,000 miles. So I'd say that the clutch performed admirably considering everything that I've done to abuse it. While I didn't subject it to racing or launches, burnouts, and stuff like that, I did tow a variety of trailer loads with it. And probably the most notable abuse that I put on the clutch was during times when I'm backing my trailers up my inclined driveway. Back in the driveway, the hill, it's not really a hill, it's just a slight incline, and that's not so bad, but it requires an S maneuver so that I can wiggle between a couple of cars, and that was always done at speeds below idle speed, which means I had to slip the clutch all the way up the driveway. And there were even several times, when I could smell the scent of a protesting clutch. The clutch hated me when I did that. Sometimes I was pretty surprised that the clutch lasted so long. I inspected the clutch disc for glazing and the flywheel for hot spots, and here's some looks at it, and really, to my surprise, there's no glazing on the clutch pack, and there's only a few little spots on the flywheel that could be perceived as hot spots. Overall, I think this looks really good. I considered replacing my RSR clutch with HS Tuning's RSR hybrid clutch kit. HS Tuning's website states that the hybrid clutch is a tad stiffer than the standard RSR clutch and that the clutch exhibits some chatter at idle. Given that news and an observation made during my daughter's clutch upgrade, she didn't get RSR, I will explain her upgrade in another video, I decided to go with the clutch that I originally wanted before discovering RSR, and that would be a Stage 2 Endurance by South Bend Clutch. I will explain that decision in a separate review of my South Bend clutch. For the record, though, I will say that the RSR clutch has been fantastic, or was fantastic, and I would recommend it for any GTI owner who knows that they won't tune past Stage 2 levels. Feel free to ask questions if you have them. I'm always happy to answer. As always, I appreciate you being here, and I will see you next time. Take care.